Hello, I'm Jamie Rylett. Thank you for joining me for Yoga Evolve's second Yin Yoga class. So the first class was more an introduction to Yin Yoga. Today we're really going to be concentrating on the mindful side of this practice. So this will be a very slow practice. We're going to treat this almost like an active meditation. So we're going to begin on our backs, laying in pentacle pose. So laying in a big star or X shape. Just taking the first few moments of the class, start to get into the yoga mindset. So whatever movie is currently playing in your head, just hitting pause for the next hour at least. And dropping all concerns. It's almost like a traveller dropping off a backpack and sitting in a comfy chair. We can pick those concerns up again at the end of class if you wish. For now, turning off from the outside world and tuning into the body. And trying to maintain this heightened sense of attention throughout the class. And if at any stage during this practice the mind does start to wander, we keep trying to bring it back to the sensations in the body. Keep trying to bring it back to the breath. And slowly starting to bring your knees into the chest, taking a gentle rocking motion from side to side. And keeping our left knee in, we're going to take our right ankle and place it on top of the left thigh. We can reach through this triangle and take a hold of our hamstring, so reaching the right hand through, interlacing your fingers, coming into eye of the needle pose. We have a few options in this pose. You might decide to flex your foot to try and protect the knee. Maybe you allow your toes to start to point down towards the mat. Maybe that increases the sensations on that outer glutes piriformis area on the right side. If you're not feeling this pose and you need a little bit more, maybe you bring your right ankle closer to your left hip bone. Maybe it's the opposite sensation. Maybe this feels a little bit intense. In that case, maybe you bring the sole of your left foot down to the ground. So throughout this practice, finding which version of every pose works for you. That's going to be different from person to person. It's also going to be different for yourself from week to week. The body is not always the same. Some weeks we feel tight, some weeks we feel really open. So we're trying to move away from attachment today to how things look or how things should feel. Just concentrate on how they actually feel. And the mantra for the practice is really, if you're feeling this, you're doing it. So you're getting the benefit from the pose. Don't necessarily need to do anything more. We're over halfway through on this side now. So really concentrating your awareness into the sensations of this pose. Noticing how those sensations change throughout the posture. And noticing the effect that the pose has on your breath. Maybe your breathing has slowed already. And noticing where you feel the breath. So one definition of mindfulness is pure attention. That's what we're looking for throughout this practice today. And releasing the hamstring, bringing your knees into the chest, preparing to come into happy baby pose. So maybe taking a grip of the outside of the feet, maybe you grip the inside of the feet. We start by using our biceps to pull the knees down into the armpits. And once we find this point of first resistance, once we find our edge, then we resolve to remain still. And we let go of that yang component of pulling. And we start relaxing into the pose. So trying to keep the soles of your feet facing the sky. And feeling free to change the grip from gripping the outside to maybe gripping the inside. This will take your knees slightly wider. Or maybe if this becomes too much, we take a grip of our hamstrings instead. So in this practice of Yin Yoga, we really get to work on combating the wanting mind. The mind always wants something, whether it wants a hotter cup of coffee, whether it wants the air conditioning on, whether it wants to come out of this pose early. So now you're probably feeling there's some better things you could be doing. Maybe you're thinking, really don't want to be here anymore. It's a very normal reaction, but we're working to combat the wanting mind. So if we can stay in this pose, when our mind is telling us it would rather be doing something else, we're really working on building our resolve. And this can carry over into other areas of our life. And maybe things that used to affect you and agitate you before class won't have the same sway over you anymore. So one of the things we're trying to do in yoga is breathe through challenging times. And this has applications far beyond what we do today here on the mat. So maybe next time you're in a challenging situation at work, with family or friends, a stressful situation, you can look back on these experiences and just start to breathe through those challenging times. And we're coming into the last few breaths here now. And releasing the feet, bringing the knees back into the chest. Maybe taking a gentle rock, maybe taking any movements that feel good for you now. We're going to prepare to come into our eye of the needle pose on the opposite side. So this time we'd be taking our left ankle, placing it on top of the right thigh, creating that triangle, reaching through, interlacing our fingers. So we have an intention here in this pose. The intention is to stretch that outer glute, the piriformis area. So we have that intention, and then we pay attention to how we feel within this pose. And when we're holding any pose for a relatively long time, like we do in this practice, there may be elements of discomfort that arise. And part of the practice is to find comfort within discomfort. But we always need to know the difference between discomfort and pain. So as a basic guide, if you feel anything today as sharp or stabbing, anything electrical in nature, maybe a tingling or pins and needles sensation, they could all be cues that you need to back off. However, if you're feeling this as a constant ache or a dull tugging sensation, that's actually what we're looking for. So we need to feel these postures. So we're trying to move away from this attitude of no pain, no gain. But we have our own saying, no strain, no gain. So we're always looking for sensation, but that sensation should never be sensational. Trying to find that middle way in every pose. I'm coming towards the last minute here now. And releasing the hamstring, bringing our knees into the chest again, option to take that rocking motion, and then bringing our feet down as if we're going to come into a bridge pose. But instead we're going to walk our feet wider, keep walking your feet wide, and try and keep your toes pointing at the bottom of your mat. The long edge of your feet runs parallel to the long edge of the mat. We're coming into TP pose, so letting your knees falling towards each other, keeping the soles of your feet grounded. So if your knees come so far together that they're touching, try walking your feet slightly wider. So the objective is not to get the knees together, the objective is to internally rotate the hips. So trying to keep our back completely flat here. So in yoga we do a lot of external rotations, not too many internal rotations. So if you're continuing to anchor your awareness into the changing sensations, this may feel quite unusual. So really start to tune into the changes in the hips. Do you notice a feeling of space being created here? Can you tune into that space? Do you notice anything happening in that space? Can you feel blood or chi, fluid, flowing through these gaps that you're creating? Starting to walk your feet in towards each other, bringing the soles of the feet together, letting the knees fall out to the side. So doing the exact opposite movement. So before we were internally rotating the hips, now we're finding external rotation. So the temptation in yoga is always to try and go as deep as possible. So maybe now you're thinking about forcing your knees down to the ground. But doing that may cause a rounding of the lower back. So if that is happening, maybe start with your knees slightly higher. Maybe your knees are facing up to the ceiling. And then we just start to let go, start to relax into the pose. And the knees will start to make their own way down towards the mat. So 4 words to remember throughout a yin yoga practice are release, soften, and let go. See if you can do all 3 of those things now. See if you can soften a little bit more. If the mind has started to wander away now, bringing it back to those sensations in the hips. Starting to notice if the knees have started to creep a little closer to the ground. And starting to walk your feet apart and bring the knees into the chest. And then extend your legs and take the soles of the feet up towards the ceiling. Lifting the head, let the heels fall to the ground. Coming into staff pose, so our legs are long, we're sitting upright. We're going to come into half shoelace, so stepping your left foot over your right. Maybe we stay here, maybe we're feeling this already, maybe we don't need to do anymore. Maybe you bring this heel in towards your glute, shuffle around and try and bring both knees into one line. Start with our hands behind us, taking the weight back in the hands. If this is comfortable, maybe we could bring our hands to the side. If this is comfortable, maybe we can start to come forward. Key point here is to keep your hips and glutes firmly down. So if we do come forward, we're keeping the weight back in the hips. We're using fingertips, palms, forearms to push the weight back into the hips. So we're feeling this on the outer hip of that top leg. We should definitely not be feeling this in the knee. So there's no knee openers in yin yoga. If you're feeling anything in the knee, you should readjust. So start to unwind that process. Maybe bring the weight behind you. Maybe even straighten the bottom leg again. So remembering the words of Vandascaravelli, don't kill the instinct of the body for the glory of the pose. If you can Start to bring your forearms to the ground. If you can bring your chin to your knee, no one will care, no one will be impressed. You will not get any prizes. So just go into the place where you feel it. That's all we need in this practice. And using the hands to start to raise the chest. I'm going to push away an imaginary wall either side, and then bring your left arm under your right, interlace your elbows, bring the palms together, coming into eagle arms. Raising the elbows in line with the face, start to push the elbows out away from the body, start to slide the shoulder blades down the back. Keep lifting the elbows, keep pushing the elbows out away from the body. Keep gazing through the forearms. Slide it, shoulders sliding down your back. So I often say on this pose, if you're enjoying this pose, you're probably not doing it. So if that's the case, try and raise your elbows a little bit more. Try and press the arms away from the body. Keep breathing into any areas of tension now. And releasing that bind, pushing away those walls, and then bringing the hands behind you, fingers pointing away from the body, straighten the bottom leg, keep your top leg where it is, and then start to just take weight back into the hands. So we're coming into sitting swan. If this is comfortable, maybe you come onto the sole of that foot. Maybe you start to flex the top foot to protect the knee. Maybe you go a little bit further and lift the hips closer to that front foot. Maybe you take the head back and add an extension of the neck. And then think about walking your little fingers in towards each other. So we're concentrating here on just taking weight back into the hands, opening up your chest. You might be feeling this in your elbows, you might be feeling this in your wrists. To a lesser extent, you might be feeling it in that outer glute. This is one of those poses where it's very easy to overstay your welcome. So if you start to feel that tingling sensation in the hands here, back off a little bit, start to reverse those steps. We're not going to be here for quite as long. This can be quite an intense pose. So we're coming into the last 40 seconds here now. So when we hold a pose for time, you may notice the body start to open up. Maybe now you can bring those little fingers closer together. So you want to have your hands the opposite way if you can. Yeah, there you go. And walking yourself back up, using the hands, bringing the foot down to the ground, maybe taking some windscreen wipers, just letting your knees fall from side to side, maybe shaking out the hands, taking any movements that feel nice for you now. We're going to prepare to take the sequence again on the opposite side. So we start in staff pose, we step over with the right foot this time, half shoelace. Maybe we decide to come into full shoelace, maybe we bring that heel towards the glute, sitting down onto the mat, starting with our hands behind us. Once we've found comfort here, we can bring the hands to the side. Maybe we even start to come forward. So when you come forward, you might feel this as well in the spine. Primarily, we're looking to feel this on that outer hip on the top leg. So when we have such a long time in each pose, we start to connect to sensations that maybe you don't notice in your normal class, your yang class, or maybe in your day-to-day life. So maybe this pose feels very different on this side to the previous side. Nobody's symmetrical, nobody looks like that skeleton that we see in anatomy class. So it's very normal to have a difference from left to right. So we're not concentrating on how things look, we're really just concentrating on how they feel. Pushing away those imaginary walls again, raising the chest. Preparing to take eagle arms, left under right, bringing the elbows together, bringing the palms together. Raising our elbows in line with the face, pushing the elbows out away from the body. So in Buddhism, they often talk about attachment being a route to suffering. In this practice, if we're attached to making everything symmetrical, making everything look a certain way, then that can be a route to injury. So in this practice, and in any modern yoga practice, sensation is always more important than shape. So remembering that mantra, if you're feeling it, you're doing it. You don't necessarily need to do anything more. Releasing that eagle bind, pushing away those walls, preparing to come into our sitting swan pose, bringing the hands behind you, fingers pointing away from the body, straightening the bottom leg, just taking weight back into the hands, seeing how this feels here. Maybe we come onto the sole of the front foot. Maybe we lift the heel, lift the glutes closer to the heel, flexing the foot on the top leg to protect the knee. Maybe taking our head back, adding that extension through the neck if that's comfortable. And then looking to try and walk our little fingers closer together. Breathing directly into any areas of tension. So maybe using a visualization technique of imagining inhaling a healing white light directly into that area of tension. And on the exhale, exhaling out all of that tightness and restriction. Coming into the last couple of breaths here. Having that intention, paying attention. Can your fingers move closer together? Do you need to back off? Constantly having that awareness. And starting to make your way out of the posture, taking any of those movements from the previous side. So maybe we start to let our knees fall from side to side, maybe we shake out our arms, taking any movements that feel good for you now. We're going to prepare to come into cat pulling its tail pose. I can show you first of all. So we'll start on our backs, the right foot pointing towards the sky. We're going to take our right leg across to the left hand side, twisting the body, using your left arm as a pillow or come onto your hand. The key point is to come onto the toes of that straight leg, the left leg in this case. Press them into the mat, turn the hip and the thigh. So the thigh is now completely flat. We can walk the right leg higher, and then we can bend the back knee, take a grip of the outside or inside of the foot. So I can talk you through that process. So starting on your back, right foot up to the sky. Take the right leg across the body. Use your left arm here as a pillow or your hand. Start to press the toes of your left foot into the mat. Use that to turn the hip and the thigh. So the thigh is now completely flat. Maybe you walk your right foot a little bit higher towards the head. Then bending that back knee, bring the heel in towards your glute. Reach back, take a hold of the inside or outside of the foot. So maybe spend the first few moments of this pose just experimenting, bringing the heel in towards your glute at different angles. Trying to find that sweet spot. And then when we find that point, then we resolve to remain still. So although this pose has quite a nice name, cat pulling its tail, looks quite relaxing, doesn't always feel that relaxing. That's because many of us have really tight hip flexors. If you're sitting at a desk all day, potentially you have these short, tight hip flexors, and this can affect your whole body. So when we come into a pose like this for time and start to lengthen the hip flexors, this can feel quite intense. Going towards halfway in the pose now. So we're really trying to move away from a goal-orientated practice. So if our whole reason for coming to yoga is just to improve our range of motion, it comes to a point where you can only go so far. And then what's your reason for coming back to the mat? So instead of having this constant need to achieve and push further, really concentrating more on how this practice makes you feel. How do you feel after every pose? How do you feel after practice? Does this practice feel good for your body? Does this feel like something that improves your life? If so, then we don't need anything else. Coming into the last few breaths here. And releasing the foot, slowly allow it to return to the mat. Make your way onto your back, coming into pentacle pose, laying in that big star or X shape. Our arms are wide, our legs are wide. And taking a moment here to observe the rebound. So we've just done quite an intense hip opener that will have had some kind of effect on the body. Just really tuning in now. Noticing the effect it's had on your hips. These rebound poses should be the ultimate expression of mindfulness. So one definition of mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment deliberately and non-judgmentally. It's exactly what we're trying to do here. And now preparing to take the pose on the opposite side. We're going to take our left leg, straighten the leg, take the sole of the foot towards the sky. Let that leg come across the body, falling to your right hand side. Use your right arm as a pillow here. And then start to press the toes into the mat, turning your hip and your thigh. The thigh is now flush against the mat. We can walk the left foot higher and then bending that back knee, bringing the heel in towards the glutes, taking a hold of the inside or outside of the foot. And taking the first few moments of this pose to experiment with the angle that you bring the heel in. Maybe experiment with the grip, maybe hold the inside of the foot, maybe try the outside of the foot. And then try and find that place of comfort. So if you've read Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book Flow, you might have heard that when a challenge is too high, it may bring on a state of anxiety. When a challenge is not challenging enough, it can soon bring on a state of boredom. So what we're always looking for is that flow channel, that middle way. That's what we're looking for here. We're trying to flow with the changing edge in the pose. So we're not forcing this practice. We're treating it like a surfer treats the waves. The surfer would never fight against the waves, they flow with the waves. So flowing with your edge. Coming into the last minute here now. releasing the foot, slowly allowing it to return to the mat, making your way to your back, coming into pentacle pose again. Taking a moment here to observe the rebound. Noticing if this feels different to just a few moments ago. Maybe now you feel more balanced. Maybe it's a different feeling. Maybe it's a feeling of heat coming over your body. Maybe a feeling of cold. Just taking this time to be completely present. Letting go of any control you have. Just accepting whatever comes up for what it is. And bringing awareness back to the body, we're going to prepare to come into Banana Asana. So we're going to walk our feet towards the right. Keep your hips down and glutes exactly where they are. Take a hold of opposite elbows and bring your arms above your head. And then start to walk your head and shoulders to the right as well. So we're coming into a banana shape. So the temptation is always to start to lift that left glute, so making sure you keep that hip down, don't roll the hip in. So we're looking for a side stretch for the whole of the left side of your body. So if your arms are above your head, you might be feeling this from the armpit, down through the intercostals, down into the IT band. You can target the IT band a little bit more by maybe taking your left ankle and crossing it over the right. For some people, this works the opposite way, so maybe try crossing your right over your left. If this position of having your elbows gripped above your head starts to become tiresome, or you start to feel that tingling sensation, maybe bring your forearms onto your forehead. If that becomes uncomfortable, maybe even bring the hands down alongside your hips, or rest them on top of the ribs. Moving into the last minute here. So in many ways, this practice of yin yoga can be the perfect antidote to our busy lives, especially when we live in cities like London. It constantly seems like we're rushing from place to place. So for many of us, we don't need more movement, we don't need more distractions, more stimulation. What we may benefit from is more stillness, more silence. So maybe your edge for this practice is It's not necessarily how deep you can go into each pose, more how still you can become, more how much silence you can contain, more how much can you let go and soften into every posture. And walking your way back to the center. We're going to go the opposite way, so walking the feet towards the left. Keep your hips where they are. Start to walk the shoulders and the head towards your left too, creating that banana shape. All of those options from the previous side apply, so we can experiment with crossing the ankles and play with the position of your arms depending on where you're feeling comfortable, where you're feeling discomfort, making this pose work for you. There's so many benefits to this practice of yin yoga. One of the benefits is the way that it allows us to escape this state of sympathetic dominance of the nervous system and move towards parasympathetic dominance. So for many of us, we spend our days in this fight or flight state. It does have its place. If you're in a combat situation, you're escaping a predator, and this release of adrenaline, this release of cortisol, this raising of your blood pressure, it's going to make you faster and stronger. For many of us, that is not a daily reality. Reality may be more that we have a stressful meeting at work, we have a presentation, we have a deadline. So staying in this state can be very detrimental to our health. And even if your pot isn't constantly boiling over, even if it's just simmering, we're still not allowing our body to access that rest and digest state. There's long-term projects such as building the immune system, preserving a good mood. They fall by the wayside. So when we can fully relax our muscles, we're sending a signal to the brain to say that all is well. What we're trying to do in this pose, find that place of complete relaxation, completely let go. And slowly returning back to the center. We're going to finish with a reclining twist. So we're bringing our knees into the chest. We're going to take twisted root legs. So wrapping your right leg over your left. Maybe you even bring your right foot underneath your shin. Most people, you might not have that ability due to the shape of your bones. Take your arms wide. And then let your knees fall to the right hand side. So finding a twist. So if this isn't that comfortable, you can change the twist of the legs. Or you can just bring both knees together. So finding the version that works for you again. As always in these poses, there are a few different options. We can have our arms wide. We can bring our arms into more of a cactus position, taking a bend in the elbows. You may even decide to use your right hand to help guide the knees closer to the ground. You may use a block underneath your knees so you can rest your shoulders back on the ground. I'm trying to find that variation where you can completely let go. And as always, if you do feel any discomfort here, if you feel a tingling in the fingers or the hands, listening to your body, bringing the hands down alongside the hips or resting them on top of the ribs. Remembering those 4 words: release, soften and let go. See if we can let go a little bit more. See if we can soften a little bit more into the pose. Sink a little bit deeper into the mat. And keeping your knees where they are, bring your left hand across the body to join the right. Pause on your right hand side for a moment. And when you're ready, making your way onto your back. Preparing to take the pose on the opposite side, so we shift the hips slightly to the right. Taking that twisted roots leg position on the opposite side. Finding the arm position that works for you, and then letting the knees fall to the left-hand side. So in this practice, we're not concerned with perfect alignment. We're just concerned with being able to let go, being able to surrender to the pose. So often we know that we should be relaxing here, we should be bringing our attention to the sensations in our body. We should be bringing our mind back to the breath. It's not always that easy. So the mind's job is to create thoughts, and maybe now you have these constant thoughts coming into your head. It's very normal. So rather than trying to block thoughts, we're just looking for that Zen mind, the non-sticky mind. So these thoughts come, and we just observe them and let them just float away like clouds. And then we return to the breath. And keeping the knees as they are, bringing the right hand across the body to join the left. Pausing here for a moment. Before making the way onto our backs, hugging the knees into the chest, taking a gentle rock. Maybe bringing your forehead towards your knees, making that gentle rounding of the upper spine. Taking any other movements that feel nice for you now. And preparing to come into our final pose, corpse pose. So starting to straighten the legs, turning the palms to face the sky. Sliding the shoulders down away from the ears. Closing the eyes or softening the gaze. And starting to find stillness. Taking the last few moments to check in with the body. Start to observe the natural pulsing and movement of chi throughout your whole body. And completely relax, making each breath quieter than the last, and releasing all tension. And slowly starting to bring some awareness back into the body, gently moving your fingers and toes. And in your own time, taking a big stretch through the whole body, Taking your arms up overhead. And then bringing the knees into the chest, turning onto your right hand side. Pausing here for a moment. Keeping the eyes closed, using the left hand to push your way up to a seated position. Bringing the palms together in prayer at heart center. Gently bowing the head and bringing the fingertips to third eye point. Namaste.